Ladies and gentlemen, here is the latest bulletin from the Intercontinental Radio News.
Step into the sand.
This is Macabre Grimoire with Ari Show, Travis Nye, and Robert Mayling.
Hey everybody, welcome to Macabre Grimoire Chapter 5. Topic today is D.B. Cooper. I'm your host, Ari Show, here with Rob Mayling and Travis Nye.
Hey, hey, hey.
Hey.
All right, so this is basically a guy that did a heist like thousands of feet above the ground.
Around 10,000 feet.
Around 10,000 feet in an airplane in the 70s.
Let's, for framing, he is history's, America's at least, only successful sky pirate and the only skyjacker in the history of the United States to get away with it.
So does he hold like a Guinness World Record for the tallest robbery?
Tallest?
Sure.
Probably.
I think he should be recorded for that.
He should be. But then you're going to want other people that are going to try and... You don't want to create a world record for that because then other people are going to want to outdo that.
Funny you should mention that because I thought that this was totally like a thing that had never happened and never happened again. But there's more to the story than that.
Ooh.
Let me dig into it a little bit for you. This remains one of the greatest mysteries in the United States. It's a startling crime that captured the American imagination and inspired songs, movies, TV shows, and books. In 1971, on the eve of Thanksgiving, a man who called himself Dan Cooper, you see, the D.B. Cooper thing was actually a typo in a newspaper. Oh. He never called himself D.B. Cooper. He was Dan Cooper.
Interesting.
And the other papers saw it, so then they called him D.B. Cooper, and the name sounds cooler.
It does.
And that's all it is. And so it became popularly known as D.B. Cooper, and so that's what stuck. But he never actually called himself that. He called himself Dan Cooper.
So this whole time when he's being questioned, like, did D.B. Cooper take the money? Like, no.
Yeah.
No, he didn't. Yeah.
Dan
that's how it gets past the lie detector.
That's what I say when bill collectors want to collect and they misspell my name as Aaron Show. It's like, that's not me.
Yep.
Wrong number.
Who dis?
That's not my kid. No. So on the eve of Thanksgiving, he called himself Dan Cooper, and he paid $20 cash for, well, those were the days, for a ticket on the 2:45 flight from Portland, Oregon to Seattle, Tacoma, Flight 305. At this time, Flight 305 was one of the shortest domestic air routes in the United States. In good weather conditions, it could be completed in less than 30 minutes. Witnesses, including the flight attendant who dealt directly with him, described him as a quiet man. He ordered a bourbon and soda while waiting for takeoff. Those were the days, because he wasn't even in first class, and they gave him a bourbon and soda. Damn. In midair, just after 3 p.m., from his seat, which was 18C, he handed the flight attendant a note saying that he had a bomb in his briefcase, and he showed her a glimpse of the wires and red sticks inside of a briefcase he had. He was dressed as just like a regular businessman on a business trip, loafers, suit, glass, and then he had glasses with him. She wrote down his demands for 4 parachutes and $200,000. Interestingly, and this will come up later, he failed to specify what denomination of ransom money he wanted, which is not only rare, but some people think that makes him like a total rank amateur that he didn't do that, because for all he knows, they could send it in ones, and technically they complied.
True.
And in fact, what they will do is they will send it in 20s.
Oh.
And that will be kind of, that's another theory that's like, did that throw off maybe his calculations for this? Because it's so much heavier than what he was imagining he was going to be jumping with.
Oh.
So keep that.
I'll keep that in mind.
Stick a pin in that.
Yeah.
A quiet man. Okay, yeah. He ordered a bourbon and soda for takeoff. 18C. In Seattle, the passengers were exchanged for money and parachutes. Then the flight resumed with just the flight crew and Mr. Cooper. And the crew, they started a route to Mexico City, which is where he requested to fly, but he ordered that the plane fly no higher than 10,000 feet, which is much lower than the typical operating area for this airplane. He also demanded that they fly with their flaps deployed and their landing gear out, which is very strange. But what it does is that it slows the airplane way down from what it normally cruises at. It lowered its speed to 200 miles per hour, which is not at all typical. It's a decent, it's a little fast, but it's a decent jumping speed, but not a cruising speed for an airliner. Let's see. One note I added here is that a typical skydiver jumps from around 13,000 feet.
So he's just a little bit below.
So he's just a little bit below what a modern typical skydiver would go with.
But that's interesting, though, that he basically changed the flight's path to go down to Mexico City. How pissed would you be, though, if you're on that flight and, like, you're just going to go 20 minutes, a 30-minute flight up to, Seattle?
Well, and this goes with his reputation as a gentleman thief. Other than the flight crew,
Yeah.
he let everyone go at the airport where they gave him the money and the parachutes. And that's part of the reason you got to remember this is pre 9/11. There's
True.
There's like practically no airport security whatsoever, and we'll get on that in a moment. But people on the flight said that he was super polite and friendly, and the stewardesses even kind of liked him a little bit and stuff. And but he never threatened anyone. He's just like, I have a bomb, just as a matter of fact thing.
Yeah.
And so all the hostages and most of the flight attendants. So it was basically like the one or two flight attendants that he'd been dealing directly with, and actually the one he spent the most time with, the one that he showed the bomb, she was released when they landed at that airport. So it was just like, I think pilot, co-pilot, and engineer, and then like one or two stewardesses were all that was on the plane with him.
Oh, I guess I thought he was on the plane with the passengers going.
Nope.
He let all the passengers.
He let all the passengers go.
Oh, and then they resumed. Then they retook off.
Because that was part of his demands, was 4 parachutes, $200,000, and they refueled.
Oh, okay.
And traded the passengers. For the money.
Sorry, I got off on a tangent there, but the reason I started that tangent was to explain that back then, we typically, with airjackers like this, they were usually like political people or people who were desperate, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And if you just followed their directions, they never really killed anybody. It was a much different time, very boring.
Right.
The whole idea of killing civilians in like a terrorist act or something like that was not a common thing.
Right.
Even when someone in the Middle East hijacked an airplane during this era, they didn't kill anybody. It was just like, I'm going to hold this airplane and inconvenience these people until you give me my shit.
Right.
So there was nobody was really that scared about it. And, other than obviously the people who are still on the plane with him who were worried about the fact that he does appear to have a bomb. So let's see. So they're, cruising at about 10,000 feet. This is something I didn't know. 2 U.S. Air Force jet fighters traveled with the plane, but they had trouble operating at the low speed and altitude. See, what I didn't know was about that there were 2 fighters that were basically trailing them, but they couldn't trail because it was so slow and so low that basically they were just circling above it and doing wide circles around the area where the plane was because they couldn't slow down enough to actually watch what happened. So, they informed him that there wasn't enough fuel to make it all the way to Mexico City flying that way, obviously, because that's such a drag with the landing gear and stuff. They changed course and they set it to Reno. Dan Cooper is quoted saying at one point, it's like, Reno sounds nice, let's go there. After 8 p.m., somewhere between Seattle and Reno, he jumped out of the back of the Boeing 727. The 727 is one of the only commercial jetliners that was ever used that has a rear deployed staircase, which is another thing I never knew about this story. I always pictured him jumping out of an emergency hatch on the side of a plane.
Me too.
But he jumped out of the back just like they do a C-130 in the Army.
Yeah.
Because this stair lift basically lowers out of the back of it like the Millennium Falcon and just jump. So, yeah, I thought that was crazy. So, like, personally, that makes me think that he knew what aircraft he was dealing with, that they had that stairs.
Yeah, he
because
must
it's not like it's not like the era of the internet where he could have Googled that shit.
Right.
Let's see. So, and in 1971, there weren't even any safeguards to keep him from doing that mid-flight. So they didn't even know he started doing it until the drag got even worse, and all of a sudden the depressurizing light came on. So he jumped out of the plane. He landed somewhere in a wooded area near a town called Ariel, Washington, with the parachute and ransom, and disappeared. This triggered one of the largest manhunts in U.S. history. The Washington National Guard was deployed along with nearly 100 FBI agents. They found nothing.
That's impressive.
Yeah, it's super impressive. Another thing people point out is, like, there's freezing water with the Columbia River and a bunch of lakes that were underneath him that he could have landed in. Mm-hmm. Even if he lands, like, safely in the woods, it's almost freezing out, and he is in a suit jacket and loafers. That was the one thing that blew a lot of people's mind, is that he just had like 1960s loafers and little thin socks and stuff like that, and but he did it anyway.
And it was nighttime.
Yep, and nighttime.
And so even knowing when or where he was jumping had to have been impressive, because like no GPS or anything like that.
And that makes me wonder if he did, because like he told them to go to Mexico City, and then they're like, we can't make Mexico City, so okay, how about Reno? So did he know where he was going to land? Did he know what the angle-wise difference would be from traveling to Mexico City or traveling to Reno instead of Mexico City?
Right.
Or did he just figure that's the same general direction he wanted to travel?
I'm almost wondering if he planned on jumping somewhere in Washington State anyways.
That seems to me to be like he was, well, obviously with the parachutes and stuff, he was, going to jump.
Right.
Was the plan, and he was probably going to jump early, so I guess it probably wasn't that factor that I'm worried about is probably not that big a factor because it's so early in the flight.
Right.
Or early in a Mexico City flight.
And honestly, if he would have drowned, everything comes up eventually. Like, you would have found a body eventually.
The shoe would definitely be floating. And
yeah, I mean, anything would have turned up.
We'll get into the logistics of that, because this case gets weirder on that front.
Okay.
Let's see. So, largest manhunt in U.S. history. So, nothing, absolutely nothing about this case until 9 years later, when on February 7th in 1980, a 10-year-old boy who was gathering firewood with his father on the banks of the Columbia River found 3 bundles of moldy cash with the rubber band still intact.
Whoa.
The serial now call back here to when I mentioned that it was the 20s.
Yeah.
The money was given to him in 20s instead of $100 bills, so it was a big bag, heavy thing. I think they said like 50 pounds or something like
Jesus.
that. Yeah, like not light at all. The flight attendant that saw him prepping they never saw him jump, but that saw him kind of getting ready, thought he tied the bag around his waist with a cord or whatever. But anyway, because this is the era where criminals don't know this is a thing that the government could commonly do, they gave him, like, that's why you'll hear, like, unmarked bills or unsequential bills when in movies when someone goes, I demand this much money in unmarked, unsequential bills. It's because this is, like, a new era for this tactic. They sequenced all the numbers so they're, like, in perfect order, so they know if the serial number on these bills is within this range, it's definitely D.B. Cooper money.
Right.
So in theory, as soon as he would have ever spent any of that money over the 9 years, the federal government would have eventually found out about it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Which, keep in mind, for those 9 years, nothing. So, we're back at this riverbank 9 years later, and we find these bills with the serial numbers that match those given to D.B. Cooper. But this discovery would only lead to more questions than answers. For example, these bills were found 20 miles outside of the widest predicted drop zone the FBI had used.
Wow.
It was also the opposite direction from which the wind was blowing the night that D.B. Cooper jumped, which that's something I didn't know and is weird. A geologist at the time was also very perplexed that the bills were discovered above a portion of the river that had been dredged in 1974. This meant that the money that money got there at least 3 years after the heist, or else it would have been
Pulled up
in the dredging.
Yeah.
So, after years of dead ends, the FBI finally, they never got any further on this. After 45 years, they ended the investigation as of July 2016.
Jesus.
The FBI has said that it has interviewed hundreds of people, tracked leads across the nation, scoured the aircraft for evidence, and by the 5th anniversary of the hijacking had investigated 800 suspects. The New York Times reported in 2011 that the FBI case available in an online vault, measures 40 feet long, cataloging more than 100,000 suspects.
1,000.
What did I say?
You said 100,000?
Oh, yeah, 1,000 suspects. Sorry. A third of the country was D.B. Cooper. It's kind of like I'm Spartacus.
Yes.
I'm D.B. Cooper.
Sorry.
I wish. I want that 200,000. Let's see. Some of these leads were supplied by psychics, and some were people turning in members of their family they were suspicious of, and some were coming from deathbed confessions.
Wow.
So just kind of a media circus of things that people were turning in and calling in, which, that makes you wonder how much detail they lost just in the static of the profile of the case. Mm-hmm. So let's see. This is what's promising here, or not promising, because it's kind of a dead end for them, but it's what tells you that someone could survive doing this, is that someone shortly after D.B. Cooper did the exact same thing, survived, got away with it, and they only caught up with him because either him or some idiot that knew him bragged about it, and the FBI got word of it.
Shut.
So, let's see. He's one of the suspects they looked at. He was named Richard Floyd McCoy. He carried out a very similar hijacking and escaped by parachute less than 5 months after the Cooper flight. But Mr. McCoy was ruled out as a suspect because he didn't match the descriptions provided to the flight attendants, which if you look at the artist composite of D.B. Cooper and then look at the pictures of this guy, it's like a totally different guy, much, much broader, flatter face. And so the witnesses are like, oh, hell no, that's not him. He's not even the right height and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Plus he had a kind of a weak, but he had an alibi that he gave the FBI. Interesting with this one, so he was bragging to a friend, and I thought this was funny because my wife Amanda was actually in the room when I was watching a documentary that I used as one of the sources for this, and Amanda was sitting there and she's just like, why did he only ask for $200,000? And I was like, well, it was 71, and so that was a lot more money back then. However, this McCoy guy, he stole I didn't list it on here in my notes, damn. But he stole $500,000, that's right.
Oh.
He asked for $500,000, and the guy he bragged, that's right, that's because that's part of how they caught him. The guy he bragged to in a bar about how he could do that so easy, and this D.B. Cooper's nothing, and how stupid was he to only ask for $200,000. And so he did that, and then a week later went out and did it. So this guy was like, I was just in a bar with a guy who said, I'm going to do what D.B. Cooper did, and I'm going to ask for $500,000.
Yeah, so is D.B. Cooper really that? Yeah, it's like, is he? Come on.
So, yeah. So, anyway, he gets caught, and they literally, in his front porch, because he's got a wife and 3 kids and stuff like that. They find a duffel bag with the $500,000 in it. So,
oh wow,
nailed. He went to jail for I want to say 15 years or something like that. Anyway, so little background on hijackings, and this I already covered this a little bit and jumped ahead with the talking about how they weren't as violent as they are now, and
right.
Back then it's you just did what the hijackers asked, and nobody really would get hurt. So
right.
it was just kind of oh, okay, we're doing this thing now. Hijackings during the Cold War were often desperate attempts to escape the Iron Curtain, but during the 1970s, criminals began using them as leverage in ransom negotiations. The D.B. Cooper case became one of the most famous examples of the era of hijacking. By the mid-70s, at least 150 planes had been skyjacked in the U.S. alone.
So they were trying to go for a world record. they're trying to like maybe one up DB Cooper,
Well,
maybe just see if they could do it, or
Well, yeah, it's just like they saw that, and then they're like, shit, it's that easy to just like take a whole plane and get a bunch of cash. All you gotta do is say, I'm gonna kill these people, and just sit back, drink a bourbon, and get handed a bunch of cash. Fuck yeah. So,
let's go.
yeah, now we're
considering DB Cooper's the only person that was never captured, kind of tells you that, yeah, not that great a plan.
Well, yeah, you got to keep your mouth shut. You have to have an airtight plan, and you have to know a lot of things.
And they have to just assume your name is something else.
Well, and how did they get the $200,000? Did they just get it from the passengers on the plane, or did they get it when they landed?
They got it when they landed, along with the parachutes.
Okay.
Those were actual demands, so it was like they sent someone, like a member of the flight crew came down, picked up the 4 parachutes, picked up the cash, and then walked it back in while the other passengers were
deboarding.
It was very orderly and
Okay.
very like, it's not like nowadays where you'd have a SWAT team just ready to strike right there and sharpshooters on the roof and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
It's a different era.
Okay.
Let's see.
And then a quick question, too. What's the Iron Curtain?
You don't know what the Iron Curtain is?
That's why I'm asking.
Okay. I'm sorry. No, so you're familiar with the Cold War, with the Soviet Union?
Fairly familiar. Okay.
Okay. Countries that are on the other side that were part of the Warsaw Pact or part of the communist side.
Yeah.
They are considered on the other side of the Iron Curtain. I'm making quote marks with my fingers as I say this for
Air
listeners.
quotes. Yep.
I heard that a little bit in the voice,
It comes from a quote from Winston Churchill in a speech shortly after the end of World War II, right about the time that the Russians started cutting off the East Germans from the West Germans, and they cut off Czechoslovakia and put down rebellions there. And it's really it's probably I think 4 years after World War II when stuff is really getting crappy. With the Soviet Union is becoming the Soviet Union we know from classic stereotypical Cold War stuff.
Right.
And Churchill said that an iron curtain was descending across the face of Europe. And it iron because of the divisions of tanks, because the Russians had tanks, man.
Right.
What's funny is you look at the U.S. arsenal from the first Gulf War. The Iraqis had a holy crap load of actually pretty good Soviet tanks that they bought, surplus when the Soviet Union fell. But the U.S. arsenal was nothing but machines designed to kill those tanks.
Oh, Jesus.
Because they expected to fight a land war in Europe where it would be, we're going to be overwhelmed by Soviet tanks.
Gotcha. Okay.
That's why the Abrams tank that we have isn't really a tank so much as a tank killer. The main cannon on it fires a depleted uranium wedge.
Jesus.
That's specifically designed to break open the armor of a Soviet tank.
Fuck.
And our attack helicopters, like the Apache and stuff like that that were so common then, designed as tank killers.
Wow.
So yeah, little side note.
No, and I needed that. I didn't know that. Okay.
Sorry, military history. I can go on forever, but anyway. So yeah, that's what the Iron Curtain is.
Thank you.
So you had people who were East Germans who were trying to get over to the other side and escape to democracy and stuff like that.
Gotcha.
And you saw a lot of it involving Cuba, I want to say, in this era, but I didn't find anything about that in the notes, and I didn't really. It's not really germane, I guess.
Right.
Let's see. So I thought this was interesting. This came up in a New York Times article. Originally, this was deemed a case of air piracy, which is a felony that carries a statute of limitations of 5 years. However, a grand jury indicted him in absentia for violating the Hobbs Act, which is a federal statute aimed at preventing the extortion. Prevent extortion, and it carries no statute of limitations. So one FBI agent was quoted in the documentary as saying, in theory, if Cooper were to walk out of the woods today, he would theoretically be charged with a crime.
Oh, shit.
So, yeah, it's still, it's a cold case, but it's still an active case.
Yeah.
So here's a little perspective on how it... Oh, go ahead.
No. So, basically, if he showed up at any point in time now, they'd be like, your ass is going to jail.
It's for anyone who was sitting there wondering, what's the statute of limitations on this? There are none for the Hobbs Act. So,
Gotcha.
So he'd be screwed if they ever found him, even in a retirement home. So, the how did this affect American culture? The high-flying exploit of the man known as D.B. Cooper infused American popular culture at the time. Parts of the story were known to be dramatic enough to inspire writers, directors, and musicians, but the unanswered questions had to be patched up with guesswork. In the 2004 movie Without a Paddle, and I'd forgotten this until I was doing this research, was about three friends who headed into the wilderness in search of the lost ransom money of D.B. Cooper and ended up finding his skeleton. In 1981, the movie The Pursuit of D.B. Cooper opened with Treat Williams as in the lead role as a former Green Beret named J.R. Meade. The movie is based on J.R. Reed's 1980 book Free Fall. It's a fictional account of D.B. Cooper's life. And other fictional books included D.B. by Ellen Reed, in which Cooper was a Vietnam veteran named Phil Finch, and James Cain's Rainbow's End in the 1970s, which had similarities. Artists from Todd Snyder to Chuck Berry have all written songs about D.B. Cooper. And then I thought this was interesting because I read, this is from the New York Times report about it, but this is also in the National Geographic documentary that's linked in our show notes. The Ariel General Store and Tavern, because it's like a Wessington-sized town of like 200 people. They are basically a shrine to and like a museum of D.B. Cooper memorabilia from all over the world. And it's just a little tiny drinking town. And, it's closest town to where they thought he landed. It's kept the story alive. They do an annual get-together that's toasts D.B. Cooper as a folk hero. Let's see. And the in the video they showed it, and it's just like it's a bunch of drunk, rowdy, rednecks and stuff, and they're all like D.B. Cooper, and like and you could tell it's a lot of older guys who were like alive when it happened that are all hanging out.
And one of them is D.B. Cooper.
Well, they do a look-alike contest, so people dress like D.B. Cooper with a suit from that time and stuff like that, and I liked it. Like there's one old guy who's just being an ornery old guy, just being like, I'm D.B. Cooper, and a lot of them are all like, well, I'm D.B. Cooper, and his one guy says it, and his wife looks over and is like, well, then where's the hell's the money?
Right. What did you do with the money? That's interesting. I wonder if Agent Dale Cooper is from Twin Peaks isn't also a callback to D.B. Cooper.
That's really interesting because that'd be something that was in the zeitgeist and mind of like someone who would be reading about the FBI and stuff like that. So super possible. That makes a lot of sense.
My cat's name,
I missed that connection, but that could totally be a thing.
Yeah. My cat's name is also Cooper. I bet he's D.B. Cooper.
It could be. I know when we first started talking about doing this topic, the first time I heard about D.B. Cooper was in Prison Break. So that was pretty cool. So I was like, I've heard about that somewhere, and then I kind of researched it after watching the episodes and stuff.
So did you know, going into this, that someone had actually successfully done it? That Roy McCoy or whatever?
Yep. I couldn't remember his name or any facts about it at all, because it had been a while. I don't even remember what year.
Because I didn't know anyone had ever actually pulled that off and just gotten away with it, other than the fact that they were an idiot and bragged about it.
Right. Yeah, because I've heard a few different iterations of the story, so that's why I was kind of confused about...
Me too.
About the details. Like, I thought the plane was flying over, the Midwest of the United States.
Me too.
And I thought at some point in the middle of the flight, basically, that there was a load of cash on the plane, and he got the cash, and then he parachuted out, and, that was it. And he just disappeared.
I was super fuzzy on a lot of the details, and especially what really surprised me from this one was the rear of the plane had a staircase that he could literally just walk off of like a professional skydiving platform.
Yeah, because I watched, I had heard about D.B. Cooper on an episode of Bizarre States briefly, and then I also saw a little bit of it on an episode of Mysteries at the Museum, because I had an artifact from the plane or something that he jumped from. So, but... for me to get the details that messed up, I wonder how close is I actually paying attention to the story in the first place. But I legitimately thought it was a cross United States flight that he
had all this time to...
Yeah, they had all this time to, like, basically steal away into, like, the storage area.
Oh, you thought that? I did the same thing, because no one has ever actually seen him jump. Right. I had this theory that, well, maybe he's like a contortionist, and he climbed into a compartment or a part of the plane that no one would think to look in, and cram in with the cash. They'd all be scattered all over Washington looking, but especially in the National Geographic documentary, they really got into... Oh no, there were like 50 agents all over the plane as soon as it landed, and they basically took it apart piece by... They literally like took the plane apart.
Wow.
Like looking for any kind of forensic clue they could find.
Do you think... Okay, I just had this interesting thought that when they landed the plane in Portland, and I don't know if it was Portland or if it was Seattle. Anyways, he landed...
It was Lilith, Seattle.
Okay, so they landed...
Seattle Tacoma Airport.
Okay, so they landed the plane in Seattle, and one of his demands is actually bring me a pilot's uniform. So, follow me on this. So he basically stuffs his own clothes with the cash, tosses it off the plane to make it look like he sky jumped off the plane, because I'm pretty sure those fighter jets could have seen something fall off the plane, but they can't confirm if he actually fell off the plane.
They couldn't.
Right, because they couldn't.
Yeah.
So when the plane has to land, he basically says to these flight attendants and the pilots, like, don't you say anything, otherwise I will kill you or whatever. Basically threatens them. So he's able to deboard the plane with the pilots and stuff, and everybody vouches for him, and he gets off scot-free. Because he looks like a pilot. Because people are,
There was a movie...
They don't know.
A bank robbery like that where they end up dressing up all the hostages as the bank robbers, and they all walked out together.
Yeah.
Inside Man.
Yeah, that's a really good
I love that movie.
Yeah.
So that's...
Because I loved the fact that they did that to get everyone out except for the main guy whose voice would be recognized. Because I couldn't figure out for the life of me all through the movie why they were basically putting that hole in the wall. Yep. And this is like they basically like walled him in.
Yeah.
That was a great movie. I love that.
So like that's my thought on the fact that, well, he really wasn't around. You couldn't find him in Washington, but he went back to that area after the heat died down and got his cash.
There's a whole bunch of interesting thoughts on the 1980s discovery of the 3 bundles.
Yeah.
So it couldn't have been buried at the time of the crash. There was a lot of people who speculated that he literally did it as like a fuck you to the cops, to the FBI investigators mocking them.
Yep.
The National Geographic special got into some really interesting forensics that they did specifically for this documentary, and the thing is that they come up with a very solid theory on the surface of what happened, except that there's one part of their theory that I think is super harebrained and totally like derails it. So in the documentary, the main thesis of it is that they argue that, well, it's pretty sure D.B. Cooper, he landed in the Columbia River, died, and from hypothermia because of the cold.
Yep.
And the money got dislodged at some point, and so that the 3 bundles showed up. The whole like finding a shoe or finding a body or something like that. The big problem is the Columbia River right there is really close to where it empties into the ocean.
Right. And
so that could explain why they didn't find anything. But here's the part where their very, very exhaustively researched thing falls apart for me. Mm-hmm. Is they're like, well, this location is still 4 miles up river from where where he could have where he technically would have gone in the water or whatever, is like up a direction of like the Franklin River. Basically, he would have had to travel upstream 4 miles for this theory to work.
Oh.
So.
Okay.
How would if he drowned or hypothermia, like they said in their theory?
Yeah.
How does the money end up upstream 4 miles?
Right.
And literally, the documentary, all it does is it cuts to the forensic guy being like, "Well, I imagine that it's a busy shipping area for like cargo, like hauling like coal and grain and stuff like that."
Okay.
And his theory is that, well, he just got caught in a propeller and got dragged up those 4 miles or whatever.
Yeah.
But the probability of that happening and no one noticing, and it only scattering those 3 bills and not like making a gigantic mess.
Yeah.
Really throws me. And like, so that they had the hour-long thing that really was like, wow, they've really convinced me that, yeah, he must have drowned or died of hypothermia.
Yeah.
And that's the logical explanation. That's the only explanation that it can be. And then they're like, well, this is the linchpin of our thing, is that somehow he magically had to travel 4 miles in the wrong direction up the river.
Right.
And it's like, oh, yeah. So then they lost me. And then I was like, okay, so they don't know what the hell they're talking about, or they're just trying desperately to like get to some kind of conclusion for the end of this show or something.
Right. They needed that. Yeah.
So my question is, like, because you said that they basically lumped the serial numbers to the bills together. Which,
yes.
Even if you go to the bank now and you get a stack of new bills, the serials are still in order.
Yep.
What kind of blows my mind is that I have a hard time believing that even if I had, say, $1,001 bills and the government was tracking those, that any of those would actually make it back to any government source for them to see that, unless the banks do it. The banks actually record all the serial numbers?
They scan the bills. But basically, you could go around and you could spend it at like Walmart, McDonald's, or a department store, wherever.
Yeah. And when those stores make the bank
as soon as they did their like the Brinks truck shows up and it actually goes into a bank in like a big bag of money, the now that bank will not scan it, but they will send those bills to a Federal Reserve branch, and the Federal Reserve branch will scan them.
So it's crazy to think that if I spend money here, that it truly does not stay local. Like,
oh my, no. Have you ever played, and maybe this is something for the bonus episode, but there was this internet thing in the early aughts that I participated in called Where's George?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I've never successfully done like
the very first time I ever got one of those when I was in Minnesota. I entered it in the computer, and then that turned me into a Where's George guy, and so I tracked a bunch of my money around back then. I should see if I can find my login, because I'm kind of curious now if anything new has been logged. But no, mine were the 20 I had was from it'd been in Rhode Island, Iowa, Twin Cities, Minnesota. And then I don't know that I ever checked it after I spent it, so I don't know where it went from there. But money travels, like the patterns are super crazy if you go to that site.
Well, I took the Where's George idea, like without ever actually doing it myself. But I took that concept and utilized it as a business card, because I'd write my website on every bill that I got for like a year.
Oh,
that's awesome.
Yeah.
So you're hoping you're getting local people.
Well, I don't know, because I travel outside of South Dakota, stuff like that. But I was always wondering, like, I wonder if I'll ever see this bill again.
That's pretty awesome.
The only problem with that is that if you did that enough bills to draw any kind of like government attention, the act is illegal.
Yeah, that's true.
That's why Where's George eventually got shut down. I think the website might still be up, but like they can't sell their stampers that they used to anymore that have an ID number on them and stuff, because it's technically defacing U.S. currency.
That's funny.
And then I think there's other things about like tracking currency like that is like illegal under like commerce something law or something. I just remember they got into a whole bunch of legal trouble on multiple fronts, and that's why that kind of died out.
Well, and they didn't know. They were just trying to find a way that just something
curious
entertaining.
People.
Yeah, curious people.
That's funny.
I have a friend who got a $20 bill signed by Paul Westerberg, and he held on to that for the longest time, and then he ended up having to spend it, and he was just like, oh.
Well, it's even worse than writing my website on a bill. Like, I've like physically erased like symbols on the bill and then ran it through my printer and put my logo on it.
Jesus, that is soups illegal.
Tricks, like,
holy crap!
And, like actually print it on there, or like a card, or like a hidden message or something, and actually I'll print on paper first, then tape the bill to line it up right, and then run it through my printer again.
While we're, because if you scan money and try to do anything with it in Photoshop, like your Photoshop will lock you out.
Oh no, I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
And if you go to like basically any scanner that gets sold, anything that scans or photocopies in the United States is required by law to basically have these chips in it that check for if you're scanning money. And also, if anything, so most of them won't even let you try to print money and stuff like that. It's like really tough to get even close.
Oh, it's interesting. I didn't know that.
But we had a plan where we were going to make these company fun bucks for a company that I worked for.
Oh, sure.
So we were going to scan the dollar bills, and then we were going to put the owner's, Dale's face
nice.
in the bills and make a bunch of like funny stuff all over the sides. And it was going to be, Zorb dollar. It was Dale Zorb. It was like Zorb dollars, and it was going to be like him like giving a stupid face in the middle of the bill and a bunch of jokes all over it. Anyway. Couldn't do it. You'd scan it, and even if you'd like tried to change the scale or something like that, we were starting to get worried. It's like, is this going to like call the police at some point? If we keep trying, and
the printer is secretly a fax machine.
Well, this is not a conspiracy theory. Your printer has a manufacturer signature in the pattern of the dots. That's like a fingerprint.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so for example, if you print a ransom letter or something like that, as soon as the FBI gets it, they'll know the make, model, brand of the printer. They may even know, like, based off the serial number, where it was
where it
sold.
Originated from.
Wow, so I need to go get that letter out of the mail.
Well,
exactly.
Even like typefaces on typewriters back in the day too had specific fonts, so they could narrow it down to what type of typewriter was being used. Because in the case with the pilot, Charles Lindbergh, when his baby was kidnapped, the type of typewriter that was used was a really odd brand, and so they were able to kind of track down who bought the specific typewriter and kind of narrow it down to like who had kidnapped his kid.
See, that makes sense, because I remember watching a CSI episode where there was track bleed out from the printer on the side of a page that whoever criminal they were tracking had cut out. And they're like, oh, this is what we need. I'm like, spilled ink. What are y'all looking at?
Right.
Now I understand kind of what.
Yeah.
That's crazy to know.
It's down in the microscopic, the dots.
The dot matrix.
Yeah. It's crazy how good they are with that. And there's a department at the FBI, I've seen this before, that forensically they just do nothing but collect different kinds of materials and paper, so that if they have a bomb, they literally and all that's left is this bit of cloth. They literally have a library of different cloths.
That's crazy.
Every cloth manufactured or sold in the U.S. that they can go through and compare it to.
I don't know when they started that. There was a case that I saw where this little girl was kidnapped from a Christmas party at her apartment complex, and they had a suspect that they were pretty sure that he took her from the party and then basically, killed her or whatever. Oh. And so to prove it, they had to go through his car and they had to do a fiber analysis on everything in his car.
Yep.
And they found, and so they had to figure out the dress that she was wearing, and it was the specific dress from the J.C. Penney's catalog with Big Bird on it or something.
Yep.
And they had to contact the company to get this dress so they could compare the chemical what am I looking for, analysis or whatever on the dyes in this dress, because it was such a specific color. And JCPenney's were like, well, we're all sold out of this dress, so they had to go to the public, if you have this dress, send this to us, so they could do that. So and that was back in I want to say the early 90s or late 80s when this kidnapping happened. So I wonder if maybe it can't be an exhaustive
I'm guessing it's not flawless and everything,
right, but I wonder,
but they have just thousands and thousands.
Oh, I'm sure. I believe it.
Yeah.
Because even paint has a specific chemical compound profile, not just for red paint, but specifically to your vehicle. Because only GM uses a certain type of paint, and only Ford uses a certain type of paint. So
right.
the reds aren't the same, even though if they look the same. So I watch a lot of crime documentaries.
No, I hear you there. Those are popular podcasts too, those true crime.
They are. They absolutely are.
You ever listen to White Wine True Crime?
Mm-mm.
That's a good one. It's just two ladies who sit there and drink white wine while they watch Case File on A&E.
Oh my god!
And it's and they're both comedians from Los Angeles, and so they just
it's pretty good.
It's fun.
That's awesome.
They did a crossover episode with another comedian I listened to, and that's how I found them. And I'm just like,
cool.
oh, this is good.
That's awesome.
Let's see. So yeah. So what do we think? What's our final verdict here? Because I honestly, this like in chapter 4 when we talked about the Kirkyard, that was something I investigated, and my energy was actually like down a little bit because I felt like there wasn't as much there as I thought there would be.
Right.
This is the opposite, where as soon as I got into it, I learned so much more, and I'm like, this is so much more impressive than I thought it was. I was like, oh yeah, a guy parachuted out of a plane. It's like, there's so much more going on here, and if he pulled this off, well, even what he did accomplish is like freaking
Impressive,
amazing.
yeah.
And then it's like, even the like finding the bills, like I'd heard that like, probably decades ago, and I was like, well, then that means he died if they found the money there.
Right.
And it's like washed up, and then you dig into it, the like 4 miles upstream thing, and the fact that it's only the 3 bundles, etc., and it's like, okay, no idea.
Yeah.
And so I could see why like there's FBI agents, like old retired ones now, who are just like spent their career just like agonizing over like finding DB Cooper.
Poor guys.
Yeah.
I don't know. I kind of think he might have fell in line with the flight crew, and he got away that way.
Yeah, I don't know. I would.
But that's hard. That would be very hard to do, considering they probably know exactly who were the pilots.
And the flight crew themselves would be like, this
right.
is the guy.
Like,
because the other thing is, as they're getting off, they might have the other witnesses around and stuff like that, and it'd be really messy for them to do that.
Oh, for sure.
Kind of like I liked the climbing into an overhead compartment or some other compartment on the plane idea that I had until got into the whole
the research and everything.
Yeah, when I got into the research, it's just like, nah, because they thought of that. Because you think about it, we're sitting here, and this is what we could come up with, me researching for an afternoon, and you guys, what you read and researched.
Yeah, right.
But
TV.
if you think about it, it's like, what are we going to think of that's clever that a freaking FBI agent who spent 30 years agonizing over this question didn't think of and check for,
Right.
It's like, shit.
Yeah. Well, but there are times, if you're when you're so into it, looking at this one specific topic, that
also very true.
You don't step back to take a look and think of other ideas outside the box. So that's why it's always nice to bring in a fresh mind that has no influence on the case, that can kind of come up with their own ideas to, hypothesize.
I'm definitely swayed by Prison Break's theory. Like,
what is their theory?
What's their
okay,
theory?
So Prison Break, have you guys watched the show?
No.
Okay, so you guys need to watch it because you will get sucked in. Like, when I first heard about it, I'm like, okay, how can they make 4 seasons about some dude breaking out of a prison?
That's it. Okay, little backstory. One of the very first things you ever told me when I met you was that I needed to watch Prison Break.
It's true. Like, this show is flat out phenomenal, okay? Like, it's so spot on like facts and like how like smart it is, how thought out.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, the guy breaks in, gets himself sent into prison because knowing the system and everything like that to help his brother escape. So he's covered in tattoos, and it's actually he was an architect, and so these tattoos that just look like a picture and graphics and stuff like that to everybody else is actually the prison blueprints and his map and his escape plan.
Oh, Jesus.
So he takes his plan and map into the prison with him. So he also knows all the people who are in prison, so he has like a crime boss who's going to be like the guy who secures his plane and all that stuff to escape once they get out of the prison.
Mm-hmm.
He knows DB Cooper is in the prison.
Oh, that's interesting.
And that's where they're getting their money to fund this whole thing. But basically...
So he's a character on the show?
Yes.
Oh, interesting.
Holy shit. Yeah, now I want to watch it.
So the cool thing is, though, he's just like some old guy who's been in prison forever. who has this cat, which pets are not allowed, but the cat's been grandfathered into the prison system, I guess.
Sure, yeah.
And so the main character keeps saying, I know who you are, blah, 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 here's the facts, and then the guy denies it. And then he goes, nope, here's dates, times, this is what happened, and he says, well, you could be right, son, but I was in this place here, blah, blah, I have medical history, me being in a hospital or jail or whatever. And then, like, later on in the episode, he fires back with proof, and then towards the end of the season, he finds out that he was D.B. Cooper.
Oh.
So, the cool thing to it is that basically, Michael Scofield, the main character, proves the fact that when D.B. Cooper jumped out of the plane, he had a truck waiting for him to haul the money.
Yep.
He injured his leg and was driving, hid the money, which then he wanted nothing to do with it, knowing, because obviously he knew about the plane, he knew about his flight path, he knew about the speed, all that stuff, so he's also smart enough not to actually spend the money.
Right.
So he buries the money and says, forget about it. Shortly after, he gets pulled over for drunk driving. And then this is how he ends up in prison, because he accidentally kills somebody.
Oh, shoot.
So now this old guy in prison, has a limp, and this is how he identifies him, as he jumped out of the plane and injured his leg.
Oh.
This is where the limp comes from, all this other stuff.
Yeah.
And so then in the following season, now they're going after this money, because they have to go get it. But found out that the farm they built it on no longer exists, so now they have to go into like old artifacts in the library of the old map of the town to find out where this farm used to be that he buried the money.
So it's like a central thing to this show.
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Oh, damn.
And then basically finds that there's a new housing development that was built on top of this and like underneath a concrete basement that they now have to dig through and pinpoint the location.
Oh, wow.
And then these guys that all busted out of prison together are now fighting to make sure that, one, they're not all together as convicts to get caught, but two, can trust one another that once they get the money, it will be dispersed evenly and fairly.
Right.
And it becomes this whole feud of how they're going to get this money and trying to outsmart one another.
Wow.
It's an amazing show.
Is the series done now?
They just did another season like 2 or 3 years ago.
Okay.
And it was just as good as the
So how many seasons are there?
There's 5 right now.
Okay.
There was originally 4. And every one of them was just as good as the first one.
Maybe that'll be next on our to watch list, because right now we're watching V.
You guys are still watching V?
Well, we watched the 1982 mini-series that was on TV.
Yep.
Then we watched the 1985 TV series where they actually had like 1.5 seasons. And now we are on the 2009 or 2008 series. So we just started.
Not that I stalk you, but I do listen to your podcast.
Yeah,
so
no,
I know you guys have moved into the remake.
Yep. So now we're into the remake, and that's where we're at right now. So we're kind of getting a kick out of watching these old TV shows. Just because we were on Taxi for a while there.
Oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, it was actually really, really good, and they tackled some really good topics that were actually kind of interesting, like like gay, homosexuality, and that's the only one I got right now off the top of my head. That's terrible. But,
sure,
but they did tackle a lot of really interesting topics and
surprising for its time.
Yeah, super surprising for its time. And then what did I don't remember what we did after that. I think we just dove into V after Taxi. So nice. Yeah, but we'll do that. We'll watch a lot of old TV series. Basically, right now I think our rule is kind of like they have to be done, so we can kind of binge watch it. But we don't really binge it. We just like watch 2 episodes a night, and then we get through it. So
I'm on a tangent now. Like I'm gonna have to go home and watch Prison Break again.
Now you're gonna have to watch V.
I know, right? My wife
just don't watch Heart's Son.
Yeah.
It was so bad.
Oh no.
Oh god. I won't say I'm tired, but I forgot you were in the room here, and it was probably like 10 a.m. when I did that rant the first time.
My wife actually did like a whole Prison Break birthday for me.
Whoa, that's so cute.
Where like because his code to communicate with people is these origami swans.
Yeah.
Which just looks like something he does as a
Yeah.
hobby while in prison, but
Right.
inside is a note and codes and all that other stuff,
Yeah.
Sure.
like puzzles and riddles. And so my wife started leaving these all over town, which one led to another and another and
Oh, awesome.
another. So that was super cool.
And you're just geeking out the whole time.
I know, right?
Yeah.
So I'm like as soon as I open up the first thing, I'm like, I know what this is. What are we doing?
So now you have to throw her a Harry Potter themed birthday party.
Well, that was her return to a party or a birthday that I did for her, which we lived in Port Washington, Wisconsin.
Oh.
Which is right on Lake Michigan, and like they have a Pirate Fest, which is like the largest pirate party in
Jesus, I didn't even know
US
about
type
that.
of thing.
I think
Where,
I've heard of it.
Where like an actual like pirate ship comes into the harbor.
Whoa.
And like people will like rappel or swing with ropes like onto like the sidewalks and stuff, and literally take over the town. Like it's all planned out for the whole weekend.
Yeah.
And like they'll go in and like tear down like all the flags and banners and signs and stuff and put up like black pirate flags.
Dang.
And then it becomes like everybody's dressed up as pirates downtown, and it's really, really fun. Also, it's the largest fish fry in the country. So that's really
Nice.
cool. But for her, basically, she was kind of into pirates and stuff before that anyway, because she thought it was just kind of a cool theme. So I basically did the exact same thing, but treasure hunt style.
Oh, nice.
Where I like tea-dyed some paper and then made my like a treasure map.
Oh,
Oh,
cool.
awesome.
And then we actually had to go down to the beach, which then she had to dig for her.
Presents. Oh, that's awesome. I don't do anything like stuff like that for Dominic.
Not many people do.
I was gonna say, I feel like a douche now because I'm just like when I was like 5 years ago. That's the kind of stuff I did do. Amanda and I both did like pretty extravagant things.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
As we've been getting older, I think this last time I was pretty much like, what can I get you on Amazon? I don't know. Pick something.
Anymore, it's just like, I just want a good night's sleep. Just put the kid to bed and let me sleep.
Yeah.
I have some friends that what they do when it's their birthday, they will take the kids out of the house so the birthday person gets to stay at the house by themselves and just do whatever the hell they want to do all day, and then they meet up that night for like dinner and then whatever. But yeah, Dominic and I are just like, that's how we're gonna do it. For like Father's Day, basically you don't do anything with your dad. You just, everybody leaves the house and the dad gets all day to himself. Or Mother's Day too, like.
On Father's Day, you are not a father.
Yeah, you're not a father. You get to have do whatever you want by yourself and just enjoy your day. So, birthdays too. So.
Very good.
Yeah.
So yeah, DB Cooper. I think the main bullet point on this is go watch Prison Break.
Yeah, that sounds awesome.
Yeah, it does actually. Well, thank you for listening to everyone. If you like the show, feel free to give us a shout out on social media. We are on the Facebook, and also if you really want to support us, we'd love it if you'd visit our Patreon page, check out our perks and our bonus content, like our after episode that we do after each episode, where we do a little more casually, like break out what we were talking about and kind of a little more loose on the discussion. Let's see. And yeah, so please support us on Patreon. If you can't do that, we'd ask that you please leave a nice review on iTunes, SoundCloud, or wherever you're listening to this show. So
Definitely like our Facebook page.
Absolutely.
That was a must. Like, invite others.
Do
tag
it.
others.
Do it now.
That's right.
So anyway, thank you for listening to everyone. Thank you for listening, everyone. And we will catch you next time on Macabre Grimoire.
Macabre Grimoire is a production of theSiouxEmpire.com. Learn more at macabregrimoire.com.